The view from my office on the 32nd floor of One Liberty Plaza had never gotten old, not in 7 years. Every morning I'd stand at that window with my coffee, black, no sugar, same as always, and watch the Manhattan skyline come alive below me. And I'd think about the girl who used to sleep on a pull-out couch in a studio apartment in Queens, eating peanut butter crackers for dinner because she'd miscalculated her grocery budget by $11. That girl felt like someone I'd read about once, someone else's story. Until the day my sister called and ripped that feeling right out of me. I remember exactly where I was when it happened. It was a Thursday morning, mid-October. The kind of October day New York does better than anywhere else in the world, crisp and golden. The whole city smelling like possibility and roasted nuts from the cart on the corner. I was reviewing a merger proposal, a stack of documents 2 inches thick spread across my desk, when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer. I hadn't spoken to my sister in 4 years. Not since the last time I'd tried and she'd told me I was being dramatic. But I picked up. "Mom's sick," she said. "No hello. No how are you," just that. I waited. "She needs a liver transplant. The doctors say she's running out of time." A pause. "You're a match, Adrienne. You're the only match in the family." And there it was. I want to be very clear about something. I am not a cold person. I know how I probably sound right now, a woman in a glass-walled office high above Manhattan, unbothered. But the truth is I spent years trying not to be cold. I spent years being the opposite of cold. I bent myself in half trying to be warm enough, soft enough, good enough for a family that had already made their decision about me before I was 20 years old. Let me tell you what happened. I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I was a sophomore at NYU on a partial academic scholarship, working 2 jobs, sending money home every month because my parents had made it clear that their finances were tight. And I was the responsible one, the one they could count on. My younger sister was the favorite. Everyone knew it, no one said it. My mother called her the easy one. I was never given a nickname like that. The father of my child was a good man. He still is, actually. We were young and scared and not in love, not really, but we were kind to each other. When I told him, he said he'd support whatever I decided. He meant it. He paid for half of everything, and he showed up to every appointment, and he never once made me feel like I was alone in it. My parents were a different story. I drove home to tell them in person because I thought they deserved that. I thought, and I cringe now at how naive I was, that they might surprise me. That my mother might cry and hug me and say, "We'll figure this out." That my father might be quiet for a while and then pat my shoulder and say, "You've always been strong." What actually happened was that my mother stood up from the kitchen table so fast her chair scraped back against the tile and she said, "You have ruined everything, not your life, not our plans, everything." Like my pregnancy was some kind of natural disaster that had leveled the entire family. My father didn't look at me, he stared at his hands. "You can't come back here," my mother said. "Not like this, you understand me, this is not who we are." I want to tell you I said something powerful. I want to tell you I had the perfect response, calm and devastating, the kind of thing you'd see in a movie. But I was 19 and I was pregnant, and I had just driven 3 hours on the New Jersey Turnpike, and all I did was pick up my purse and walk out the door. My sister, who had been standing in the doorway of the kitchen the whole time, watched me leave without saying a word. That was the last time I lived in that house. I went back to New York. I finished my semester. I deferred the next one, worked double shifts at a restaurant in Midtown, found a second job doing data entry at night, and I had my daughter on a February morning at Bellevue Hospital with my friend Cassandra holding my hand on one side, and my daughter's father, Joel, on the other. She came out screaming, which the nurse said was a good sign. I named her Wren. 6 pounds 4 ounces, dark hair, the most serious expression I had ever seen on a newborn. Looking at her, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, solid, like the ground was real again. The next few years were the hardest of my life and also, in a strange way, the most clarifying. When you're stripped down to the absolute basics, keep yourself alive, keep your baby alive, keep moving, you find out very quickly who you are. I found out I was stubborn. I found out I was good at numbers. I found out I could survive on 4 hours of sleep for longer than anyone should be able to. I went back to school part-time. Joel and I worked out a custody arrangement that actually functioned because we were both adults about it, which I'm proud of even now. My friend Cassandra let Wren and me sleep on her pull-out couch for 8 months, and I will love her for that until I die. I graduated with a degree in finance. Then I got a job at a mid-size investment firm in Lower Manhattan, and worked there for 3 years before someone noticed I was better than the job I'd been given. Then I moved to a bigger firm, then a bigger one. By the time I was 32, I was a senior portfolio manager overseeing accounts worth more than I could have imagined at 19, eating peanut butter crackers in Queens. My parents knew none of this. My mother had sent one letter when Ren was about 6 months old, not an apology, just a kind of inventory of grievances, as if she wanted to make sure the record was clear. I didn't respond. My father had called twice. I let it go to voicemail both times. My sister had texted occasionally over the years, the kind of vague, low-effort messages that let someone feel like they'd tried without actually trying. Hey, thinking of you, hope you're well. Once, Mom mentioned you. She seemed sad. I had learned to live without them. It wasn't dramatic or triumphant. It was just what I did. And then Ren turned 13, and something in me shifted. Not toward my parents, I want to be clear about that. But I found myself thinking about what it meant for my daughter to grow up without any sense of where she came from. Joel's family was warm and present, and she had grandparents on that side who adored her, but my side was a blank wall. She didn't ask about it much. Kids have a way of sensing what not to poke at. But I saw her sometimes at family events on Joel's side, watching his mother fuss over the little cousins, and I wondered what she thought. I contacted a therapist. Not because I was falling apart. I wasn't. But because I'm a practical person, and I thought it was practical to talk to someone who knew more than me about these things. What she said over the course of several months was essentially this: you can't control whether your family is capable of genuine accountability. You can only control whether you're making your choices from a place of clarity or a place of old pain. It was useful. I thought about it a lot, but I'm getting ahead of myself because my sister's phone call came before any of that had resolved itself. She called again the following week. I hadn't responded to the first call. This time she left a voicemail and her voice was different, tighter, less composed. She said my mother had maybe 6 months without a transplant. She said the donor list was long. She said I was O negative, same as my mother, and that I was the only family member who was compatible. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after that. I called my doctor. He walked me through what a living donor liver transplant actually entails. The surgery, the recovery, the risks, the long-term outcomes. He was thorough and honest. He did not tell me what to decide. He just made sure I understood what I was being asked. What I was being asked was to undergo major surgery, to take 6 to 8 weeks away from my job, to accept real medical risk, not catastrophic but real, to save the life of a woman who had told me at 19 years old that I had ruined everything and who had not apologized for it in 14 years. I called my sister back. I need to understand something before we go any further, I said. Does Mom know she's asking me for this? A beat of silence. She knows we're reaching out. That's not what I asked. Another silence. She's not well, Adrienne. She's not really in a position to put her on the phone. I heard shuffling. Then my mother's voice, thinner than I remembered but still recognizably hers, still carrying that particular quality that had always made me feel like I was already in trouble before I'd said a word. Adrienne. Hi, Mom. A pause. Your sister says you might be able to help. I waited to hear something else. Some acknowledgement, some recognition of the 14 years of silence between us and why it was there. The doctors say it's my only real option, she said. I know it's a lot to ask. Do you? I said. Adrienne, I need you to tell me something, before anything else. I need you to tell me you understand why I haven't been home in 14 years. I need you to say it out loud. The silence this time was longer. When she spoke, her voice had shifted into something I recognized as her defensive register, the one that had always preceded the word dramatic. You have to understand we were very traditional. We had certain expectations. I'm going to stop you there, I said. I don't want an explanation. I want accountability. Those are two different things. She didn't say anything. I'll think about it, I said, and I hung up. What I did next probably looked from the outside like I was stalling, but I wasn't stalling. I was gathering information, which is what I do. I contacted my attorney, a woman I'd worked with for years who had navigated me through contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars and who I trusted completely. I also began looking more carefully at my mother's situation. Not because I was suspicious exactly, but because I'd learned over the years that information is never your enemy. What I found made me sit down. My parents, it turned out, had not had a difficult few years financially. They'd had a catastrophic few years financially. My father had retired from his accounting firm under circumstances that were, to use my attorney's word, irregular. There had been a client dispute. There had been money that moved in ways it shouldn't have moved. There had been a settlement, confidential, that had apparently consumed most of what they'd saved. They now lived in a house with 2 mortgages on it, in a town where my father's reputation had quietly evaporated. My sister, who had always been the easy one, the favorite, the one who didn't cause problems. My sister had married a man who couldn't hold a job. She had 2 kids, a leaking roof, and credit card debt that made me close my laptop and walk to the window and stand there for a while. And my mother, who had told me I had ruined everything, had spent 14 years building a version of the story in which she was a woman of dignified principles who had made a difficult but necessary choice. I sat with all of this for 3 days. I talked to my therapist. I talked to Cassandra, who had opinions as she always did, delivered with the particular clarity of someone who had been there for all of it. I talked to Ren, which I want to be careful about how I describe because she was a teenager, and I was not going to put my pain on her. But she was also perceptive, and she was my daughter, and she asked me directly, "Are you going to help Grandma?" I said, "I don't know yet." She thought about it. "What would help you decide?" I told her I needed to see for myself what was true. I flew to New Jersey on a Tuesday. I hadn't told my mother I was coming. I called my sister from the rental car in the airport parking lot. "I'm here," I said. "I want to meet somewhere neutral. Not the house, a restaurant, just you and me first." She picked a diner we'd gone to as kids. I got there before her and sat in a corner booth and ordered coffee I wasn't going to drink, and when she walked in I had a moment of something strange. Recognition and distance at the same time. She looked older. We all do. She sat down across from me. For a moment neither of us said anything. "Thank you for coming," she said finally. "Don't thank me yet." I had questions and I asked them plainly. Where was my father in all of this? Emotionally, practically. What had actually happened with his firm? Was there any money? Did they have a plan beyond asking me for a piece of my liver? My sister answered as honestly as I think she was capable of. My father was ashamed and had made shame into anger, and had made anger into a kind of permanent fortress he lived inside of. There was almost no money. There was no real plan. My mother had been sick for over a year before they'd reached out to me, partly because no one wanted to make the call, and partly because they'd been hoping something else would materialize. "And now I'm the something else," I said. She flinched. I'm not saying it's an accusation," I said. "I'm saying it as a fact. They ran out of other options and now here you are, calling me. It's fine, I just need to understand it clearly." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I hadn't expected. "I should have said something when you left." I was standing right there and I didn't say anything, and I have thought about that. I have thought about that a lot. I looked at her. Her eyes were wet. I was 17. I was scared. I didn't know what to do and I froze. And then you were gone and I didn't know how to reach back across that, and I kept waiting for the right moment and the right moment never. She stopped. Put her hand over her mouth. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not dissolve, loosen. There is a difference. "Okay," I said. She looked up. "I hear you," I said. "That matters. I want you to know it matters." I met my mother the next day. At the house because she was not well enough to go out. My father was there but he stayed in another room, which told me everything I needed to know about where he was in this process. My mother was in the living room in a chair that had been positioned near the window. She was smaller than I remembered. People often are. I sat across from her. For a moment we just looked at each other. "You look like you've done well," she said. I'm glad." I wasn't sure she meant it. I also wasn't sure she didn't. It's a strange thing about the people who raised you. Even when they've hurt you badly, they can still surprise you, sometimes in good directions. "Mom," I said, "I need to ask you directly. Not why you did what you did when I was 19. I think I understand that. I need to know if you understand what it cost me, what it actually cost me, not as a concept, specifically." She looked at her hands. Her knuckles were thinner than I remembered. "I know you were alone," she said. "I know we weren't there. I had a baby by myself. I slept on a friend's couch for 8 months. I put myself through school while raising a child. I built a life entirely without anyone in this family, and in 14 years you have never once said, 'I'm sorry, I was wrong, what I did to you was wrong.'" The room was very quiet. Outside the window a car went by. "I know," she said very quietly. I know that. Is that an apology? She raised her eyes to mine. They were older, these eyes. They had the particular look of someone who has had a great deal of time alone with themselves and has not always liked the company. I'm sorry, she said. I was wrong. What I did to you was wrong. She said each sentence like she was placing something carefully down, like they were fragile. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm telling you I know. I sat with that for a while. Then I said, I need to tell you something. I've had my attorney look into your situation. I know about the settlement. I know about the mortgages. I know what's actually happening financially. She didn't look surprised, resigned maybe. I'm not telling you that to humiliate you, I said. I'm telling you because I need to make sure that if I do this, if I go through this surgery, it's being done with clear eyes. I'm not being told a partial I'm not being managed, I'm being told the truth. The truth, she repeated. All of it. She told me. It took a long time. Some of it I already knew, some of it was worse than I'd expected. My father came in partway through and sat down without being invited and listened, and at some point, I don't know when exactly, he started crying, not dramatically. Just quietly, with his hand over his face the way men of a certain generation cry when they finally stop holding it. I let him. When it was over, I sat there for a moment and then I said, I need you both to hear me. I have a daughter. Her name is Ren. She's 13 years old and she is extraordinary. She has never met either of you. That was a choice I made and I stand by it, because I was protecting her. But she's also old enough now to understand that she has a history, and I don't want her to grow up with a blank wall where one side of her family should be. My mother looked at me. I'm not promising forgiveness, I said. I'm not promising a relationship goes back to normal because there's no normal to go back to. What I'm saying is that I am willing to find out what's possible, and that willingness is the most I have to offer right now. The surgery was scheduled 6 weeks later. I won't describe it in detail because it was a medical procedure and not the point of this story. What I will say is that it was harder than I'd expected and easier than I'd feared, and that Cassandra flew in from Chicago and sat in the waiting room for 11 hours, and that Ren held my hand when I woke up in recovery and looked at me with her serious 13-year-old face and said, You're okay. You're good. I'm here. My mother came through it. The recovery period, hers and mine both, was long. During that time, something happened that I had not anticipated and that I find difficult to describe without sounding like I'm making it softer than it is. My mother and I started talking. On the phone first, short calls, nothing dramatic. She'd tell me about physical therapy, I'd tell her about Ren. Sometimes we'd sit in silence on the line for a while and neither of us would hang up. It was not a movie reconciliation, I want to be honest about that. There were still things between us that were not resolved and may never be fully resolved. My father and I had a conversation that was less a reconciliation than a ceasefire, and ceasefire was, I decided, good enough for now. My sister and I had begun something, slowly, carefully, that felt like it might eventually become a friendship, if we were both patient enough. And Ren, I brought her home for Thanksgiving. My actual home is in Brooklyn now, and home in this context meant my parents' house in New Jersey, which felt strange to say. Ren was polite and curious and kept her cards close, which she got from me. My mother made a sweet potato casserole that I had grown up eating, and the smell of it hit me in some part of my chest I hadn't expected. My father showed Ren his old chess set and she beat him on the third game, which made him laugh. A real laugh, from somewhere underneath all that armor. After dinner, Ren found me in the kitchen. She said she's sorry, Ren told me. I looked up. Who? Grandma, while you were outside. She just came up to me and said she was sorry for not being there and that she hopes she can make up for some of it. She paused. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, okay. That sounds right, I said. Is it going to be weird every time? I thought about it. Probably for a while. And then probably less. Ren nodded like that was a reasonable engineering problem with a known solution. I looked at her, this person I had made, this person I had stayed up with through fevers and homework crises, and the specific loneliness of being 12. This person who had Cassandra's laugh and Joel's kindness and something in her eyes that I recognized as mine, and I felt something I can only describe as complete. Not because anything was fixed, not because the years of absence had been undone, but because I had walked into that family's collapse and not been destroyed by it, because I had made a choice from a place of clarity and not from a place of old pain, because I had done something true to who I was, not who they'd tried to make me. I thought about the girl on the pull-out couch in Queens, the one who miscalculated her grocery budget by $11, the one who walked out of a kitchen with her purse and her back straight, and her whole life still ahead of her even when it didn't feel like it. I would go back and tell her, the view from the 32nd floor is real. It's waiting for you, keep moving. She would have believed me, I think. She had that in her from the beginning.